The idea of a creature larger than a gorilla with an odor like a skunk might seem far-fetched.
From the beginning of his time on Earth, man has always been fascinated by monsters, real or imagined.
The outside world is very judgmental about these things, with many people not believing in them whatsoever.
Cloaked in secrecy, they show up without warning, state their business, then vanish as quickly as they appear.
They only land in isolated places. They have taken people, I believe. They do have technology.
But the idea is if enough people focus on something, like thousands and thousands of people focus their mind on something and the image, in a very strange way, they can kind of create a real world version of the fictional entity.
Fact, fantasy, and history have come together to tease the imagination.
That the truth will out, and that no one lie can live forever.
Welcome to SuperNRML. And welcome to SuperNRML. SuperNRML, I'm Sean the Fork Chop Forker tonight with Maz Adams and Vance Nesbitt, and we're going to be talking about Mothman and the Mothman Festival that some of us attended this past week. Guys, it's nice to be back with you here this evening. Baker's okay, but he won't be here with us tonight because, guys, where's he at?
He's on assignment.
On assignment. Maz, where's he this week, do you know?
I don't know. I have to see what the wheel of the Photoshop generator will say. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. If anybody out there wants to give any future indication of where you might want to see him, let us know. He's like the Carmen Sandiego of the SuperNRML group.
I was just going to say that. Email us supernormalcast@gmail.com. supernormalcast@gmail.com. Let us know where you want to see Baker at next, and we'll try to get him there in some shape or form. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Goggles or no goggles, we will get him there.
Yes, his transsexual goggles.
I've missed out on so much.
You did. I would say it's an inside joke, but it's not, Maz, because I think you were there with us in spirit. You got the update when we could do updates, because we found out while we were in Point Pleasant there was a cell phone tower down, and unfortunately it was one of the towers that had a main node for my provider, and because I don't want to use their name, I don't want to get sued, but it prevented me from being able to get a lot of data and text messages, because Wi-Fi there was absolutely terrible as well. But a good time we had, Maz. There was a lot of people there. Vance, how many people do you think showed up?
Oh, I would say probably Saturday and Sunday, at least, at an absolute minimum, at least 2,000 people each day. But I'm sure there was an influx of even more. It seemed like the line going into the museum was about 2,000 people long. It was crazy. Yeah, it was a never-ending line. I just ended up looking to go, I have no idea where the line ends. I'll just see a sea of people standing in a single file, and they just kept getting smaller and smaller the further down the line you look, until it was out of sight. So, yeah, there was. It was a great turnout.
There was a line.
Mm-hmm.
Did it not? Even a coffee shop. You stood in line for 30 minutes to get me an iced tea. 30 minutes for an iced tea.
I didn't mind. I was thirsty too, though. Yeah. I didn't mind.
There were no lines at home. Sound like a terrible time, guys. I don't know. I made a smart decision.
Well, we were concerned about the lines you were waiting in at the Nugget Festival that you went to. Mm-hmm.
Oh, the second I got off the ride, I went right back on.
What did you?
Oh.
Yes.
It's magic. 30 minutes for an iced tea, but no line wait at the Corn Nugget Festival. So I'm glad. We wish you were there, Maz. We really did have a good time. Some good speakers. We didn't get to see everybody, only because of the condition of the theater. And I don't want to make it seem like we're ungrateful or we're slamming the State Theater, but preparations, I think, could have been made a little better to make that theater more pleasant of an experience to be in.
Well, we will post a plea for next year. Yeah. And for all our listeners, what we are talking about is the 2019 18th Annual Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
It was pleasant, except for the smell. Which, Maz, I got asked to do audio-visual for Jeff Thomas, if I could actually drive his presentation for him so he could actually, present. And so I'm sitting down in the little AV pit next to the stage, and not only am I getting the stagnant smell from the mildewy, moldy theater that's been open for less than 24 hours, but I'm getting the wafting of the air coming in from the porta potties outside. So I took a napkin and I slathered it with James Baker's muscle rub, because he always seems to have that on him. And I'm asphyxiating myself while running AV for Jeff Thomas, who's a dear friend of mine. So anything for my friends. But Vance, my nose bled for like 2 days after that.
Did it really?
It did. So I probably got myself a tumor now for trying to be a nice guy. But Jeff, I love you. If you're listening, I hope
it was
my
well
nose
worth
tumor's
it.
worth it. And you ever need me again, don't ask. But it was a good time.
It's not a tumor.
Yeah, it's not a tumor. But his presentation was really good. It was really based on his Bigfoot sighting. Because here's the thing about Mothman. Vance made this reference, and it never really... Mothman kind of is a representation of, kind of all cryptids. And the conference itself, the presentations aren't just limited to winged entities or Mothman-type beings, but across the spectrum of cryptozoology. And I think that's why the appeal of the festival has gained such traction. It's not just a specific cryptid feature. It's almost all of cryptozoology that's featured with, and the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, those type of things. Steve Ward had a really good presentation. Brian Seach, also a great presentation on winged humanoids of antiquity. Vance, I forgot to throw in Vance. I nominated you to do some MC work.
Yeah.
Voluntarily.
Yeah, that was spontaneous. Mind you, I'm sitting in the front row of the theater next to Jeff Thomas's wife, and Baker sitting behind me. And we could go back to the whole dollar stores story, but I think we'll do that after this. But, Forker had his hands full running AV for Jeff Thomas before he went up on stage, but they needed somebody to do an introduction, so Sean just kind of said, well, go give the work to Vance there, he'll do it.
Give it to Vance.
So I'm sitting there minding my own business in the front row, and next thing I know, I get a stack of papers handed to me. Here, read this, and introduce Jeff. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? Okay, I guess. Can I proofread this first? I'm looking at it. I'm like, great, there's no punctuations, and I'll muster through it.
You did
hopefully I did okay. I didn't watch a video yet, but that's okay.
For these things to happen when you're with me at these events, sometimes I just get the flow of command going, and you never know what you find yourself doing.
Mm-hmm.
It was an exciting time. Well, you did a good job, Vance. I was proud of you. Good work.
Well, I'm taking a bow as you say that, so thank you.
But it was a good time. The speakers were good for those that we got to listen to. We did miss most of Sunday. Somehow, Sunday speakers started earlier than what the presentation said it was going to. So we missed some of them, but they were pretty decent. I don't always agree with all the speakers have to say, but I'll listen to them because they're speaking and I'm not. And they were prepared, and I don't think there was an ill-prepared speaker the whole time. The Newkirks were there promoting Hellier. I don't know if you've seen that, Maz.
I have not.
Or if you've seen it promoted. Now it's a 2-season, I guess you could call it, Vance, an episodic kind of mini-series?
I think so, right. Yeah, pretty close to that.
Strange events happening in Hellier, Kentucky?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Hellier, Kentucky. I can never remember exactly where Hellier's at.
Well, it's just a creepy name within itself. I mean, if you're going to have a place that has creepy stuff happening, you may as well name it Hellier.
And if you haven't checked it out, go to Facebook and just type in Hellier, and it will pull up the information, HELLIER. And Greg and Dana, they go back with me a long time. I briefly got to saw Greg, but he was very happy to see me. I don't know why, but he's just such a nice guy. Rather we all agree on the subjects we talk about, I think the most important takeaway I had from the weekend was just be nice to each other. Don't be dicks, and enjoy the company you have, because tomorrows aren't guaranteed for anybody, sadly. And we had a great weekend with good friends, and I'm not just talking about the presentations and being at the festival, but just overall good old-fashioned camaraderie. Vance got inducted into the family. It was a really good time. I'm so glad you were able to come. It's the first time, Vance, you and I actually met face-to-face.
Yeah, but like I had said earlier, we have been talking long enough where the introduction really wasn't necessary. When we did meet face-to-face, we just kind of pick up right where we left off at. The only difference is that we physically got to walk to different areas and do different things, and we're there. We don't have to click a chat to talk to each other. So, and it was a pleasure. And having Bake there also, this just made the whole thing just so well worthwhile. It really did. So I extended my thank yous to everybody because I greatly appreciated being welcomed in the way I was welcomed in. I'm the outsider that shows up, and the Far Giorgios just, have a seat and make yourself at home. And man, what great people. The Thomases, absolutely fun to hang around with and have a conversation, and you don't feel awkward at any given point.
Gino.
Because nobody makes anybody feel. And Gene Romo, it was just have a conversation with somebody I met for the first time, never talked to before, and he starts in a conversation with me as if we've been friends for years. And I really appreciated that with everybody.
I do, and unfortunately, when you're with me, you don't really have much of a choice, because I throw you right into the mix. You get an introduction, and then that's it. Then you either sink or swim, and
right.
I just love those group of people. They're so great, and it was a great time. And I miss them already. I think Monday was a funk. You just kind of slide down, and you don't, you realize it's over. And you're back to the daily grind. But next year, guys, bigger and better than it's been before. So many people are excited because we promoted the hell out of SuperNRML while we were there. Everybody talked about it. I jumped on and did a TV interview. They didn't put Supernormal in it, but they got it, didn't they, Vance?
Yeah, they did. Gil McClanahan.
I was going to say, I think the interview itself was pretty super normal, Sean. Those faces you were making.
My squints.
You made me so proud, though. My baby boy.
I know you're like, my baby boy. It was wonderful.
My baby boy, he's a celebrity.
But it was good. Gil is an interesting fellow. I'm glad he was able to, reach out and contact us while he was there filming. And we just had a really good time with him. He gave us his card, so we'll be talking to Gil probably next year when we make our endeavor down to the Mothman Festival, because there will be another one next year, and I'm really excited.
And our goal is having a table and tent set up with SuperNRML. We would love to be able to do a live show from there and interview people that are there that may have spoken at the theater, or whoever. Doesn't matter. You could pick anybody out of the crowd and have a wonderful conversation with them. That was the thing.
Absolutely. It was just informative. Brian Seach, of course, I mentioned him earlier. The winged humanoids that have been seen throughout Chicago, Lake Michigan, Maz, they were really, everybody was asking questions about them, and I wish we had more answers. We were able to give what we were able to give, but I think Vance, in his moment of, I think his shining moment of the weekend was, really being open and honest with people, saying there's 39,000 cameras in Chicago, but not one picture of these, and I think that's a pretty bold statement to make when, people look at you as somebody who's supposed to be a staunch, diehard believer in these phenomena, that you actually have the fortitude to say, listen, I can't buy it all. And you did that. I was proud of you, Vance. You were kind of put on the spot.
Right, Well, that's okay. I don't mind being put on the spot. And it's not to say that people that have seen something in Chicago did not see something. I'm not going to argue that because I wasn't there. All I'm saying is there's nothing tangible, no physical proof, and it just seems like a lot of the witnesses have backed out of the doorway, back into the shadows again, and don't want to talk about it or be approached about it again. So that I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and put my hands up going, well, I can't say it did happen because we're not getting any cooperation as far as physical evidence or photographic evidence.
What did Brian say, 86 reports now?
I believe so, but that seems to contradict what Phantoms and Monsters is making a statement of. So, that's about half of what Phantoms and Monsters is saying. So, yeah, I think there's over 200 reports.
So think about that, as 200 reports of a flying humanoid creature seen over Chicago, one of the biggest cities in the world, and there's no photographic proof.
You're not talking about like Michael Jordan, right?
No.
Chicago. Not that he's not humanoid, he's human, but he was dunking for a while there. Great guy. But exactly. That's pretty crazy. That's that is quite the thought, and it reminds me, when you guys were talking about it before, is I love that quote. The absence of proof is not the proof of absence, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just because something hasn't been discovered yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Kind of idea floating around there.
But it throws you into that conversation and it was open very briefly to explore. Brian polled the audience of what he felt or what they felt this phenomena was, and I think misidentification and hoax was the most popular response by the audience, but there were a decent amount of people that were proud to raise their hand and say interdimensional being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more people lead towards an interdimensional being than they do a cryptid, which is outstanding to me. I think that's completely against what I thought the poll would be.
Right. Well, as Brian did in his presentation, he opened up with winged humanoids of antiquity, and he started with angels and demons. Now that goes back to biblical and written about flying. So interdimensional would make perfect sense to me, and I do believe that whatever happened in Point Pleasant was by far more prominent than what's happening in Chicago or happened in Chicago. I don't believe there's been a whole lot of confirmed reports as of late, but something that happened in a smaller town with a percentage of people to have seen it compared to the percentage of people in the city of Chicago that have seen it. And it just seems a little bit more plausible that the events that transpired over 13 months in Point Pleasant, I have a feeling there was an entity there. And wherever it comes from, whether it's interdimensional or an actual cryptid or a deformation of some sort of animal, is very possible. I can't say no to any one of those three, but definitely something happened there. Whereas what's going on in the Midwest, and we don't want to just localize it to Chicago only.
No.
These winged beings have been seen in Indiana, and in Wisconsin. Right, so it does seem to travel around a bit. Is it because people are lonely and they want to see something? I'm not really sure. And like I had mentioned with Shannon LeGros in Into the Fray, which Sean and myself did a show with her titled SuperNRML, I just tried to explain my philosophy as far as the Mothman goes, and with the camaraderie, and maybe why people are so drawn to the Mothman is because it is so conclusive, or inclusive rather, of all our cryptids, our favorite cryptids. You have your Bigfoot people that will look at the Mothman. It's a 6 to 7 foot tall humanoid being, and that draws in that curiosity and that draw. It's got glowing red eyes, which brings in the people from the extraterrestrial crowd. It also brings in the Sasquatch crowd with glowing red eyes. It has wings, which there brings us into the pterosaurs and the thunderbirds and the Jersey Devil type, and it's undefined. You can't really see what this creature looks like. That kind of brings in the shadow being type of aspect to it. So I think there's something for everybody that enjoys cryptids or the paranormal, that they see Mothman and make a connection with that way. And that does not mean that this being wouldn't exist, whether it's coming from another dimension or it's an actual flesh and blood creature that's not been discovered yet. But I think that's why so many people come to see the Mothman that way. And I truly believe that's what makes the Mothman Festival such a great event to begin with, because it's bringing everybody together with no dispute. It's not looking at one cryptid and arguing what that one specific cryptid is. No, it's interdimensional, or no, it's flesh and blood. It brings everybody in. So now you have the UFO community in there. You have the alien community in there. You have your Sasquatch people in there. You have your Thunderbird folks in there. And everybody just seems to get along so well. And I think that's what makes the Mothman Festival what it is. But I can darn well guarantee it's going to keep blossoming like a flower. It's just going to get bigger and bigger every year until they're going to have to start holding some of these festivities outside the city limits just to contain the amount of people that'll come to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong statement that you make, but I think there's so much truth to it. You draw connections and parallels that I don't, but apparently you're on a higher philosophical level than I am too. I think it's just a kick-ass event, and I've enjoyed it and experienced it so often. I've not had a negative event at Mothman, and I think that's a testament to, like you said, the inclusivity that it brings. Now, we were asked a question the other night, and we answered it, but I wanted to expand upon it a little more, and I wanted Maz's take on it. And perhaps maybe we should dive into Mothman a little bit. These sightings started in November of '66. I got it right this time, Vance.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Maz, I said the 1950s on the TV interview. I really bombed it.
Oh, man. Nobody's going to listen to this now. Our credibility went out the window.
It was a Flatwoods confusion, and I've done it too.
They're just so close together, it's hard for me to keep it straight.
They have a pill for that, by the way.
They do.
Have any Flatwood confusion?
BlueChew.com. By the way.
Also brought to you by
AT&T and BlueChew.com. We'll get it up when you can't. It's good stuff. I take one a day, and it gets sick in my throat, and I get a neck.
You get a stiff neck. That's the joke. I'll help you. I'll help you with it, Sean. I'll get you there.
You're much funnier than I am, as you know. And
not much. Not wow, yeah.
Funnier.
Oh.
Not
I have
sillier.
A face for radio, as they say.
Yeah, well, don't we all? Don't we all? But these events in 1966, it's funny because the descriptions of Mothman that you get and everything you see on T-shirts and the plushies and the bumper stickers and the menagerie of items that they make, guys, looks nothing like the initial reports of the Mothman. And it's crazy to me how this being has become so pop culturized or illustrated that it really has no semblance to what the original sighting was.
It's kind of like a Santa Claus kind of thing, really. It's like it's been mainstreamed, you know. I think that's what it is too. Going back to what Vance was talking about, as far as the appeal, how it fits all these different parameters for these people who like all these different kinds of cryptids and paranormal creatures and such. I just think it's like kind of even though it dates back, as you said, to the 60s, it really didn't catch on until kind of recent years, and it's kind of this sexier other option. You know, it's this appetizing other option to people who are looking for something more than just aliens, ghosts, or Bigfoot. It's a little more out there, but yet there's still record and reports and a wealth of information regarding it. So.
Yeah.
And Sean, you brought up a really good point. Most of the imagery that Mothman is shown as of today does not even come close to what the initial sketch was drawn of what these people had seen. It looks kind of like an owl, a very tall owl with the eyes closer to the torso, which an owl is known to do. It'll lower its head as it's looking forward. I'm not saying it's an owl, but that's really what the initial sketch looked like. And then it just kind of morphed into a bat wing type of insect-faced type of muscular humanoid thing. And I would think that those witnesses today were to see some of the illustrations done going, no, that's not what we saw. But it would be cool if it was.
You know what that reminds me of, too, by the way? Something that started one way is like the Chupacabra.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different. I remember all those cool reptilian sketches in the 90s, and then it just totally changed into something so much less exciting to me, where it just looked like a mangy coyote. It's like, oh, it just sucked all the fun right out of it, you know?
Yeah,
right.
Pun intended. But
it wasn't, but I shouldn't tell the people that.
But the Chupacabra has become almost irrelevant to me because it seems like it's so known it's not even exciting.
Right.
And they call them different things now too, right? Like devil dogs or whatnot. Like since they
I love devil dogs, delicious.
Oh my God, aren't they great? Boy, that was a fat kid moment.
Fat kid moment. Hey, don't pull me into your shame.
Now, listen,
I keep mine in the closet.
Speaking of fat kids, there was this woman that was dancing or climbing up on the Mothman statue, and I was a little louder than I should have been. And I used a good old John Panette line, hey, gravity's a law, obey it.
Rest in peace, man. He was great.
He was fantastic. But she was really molesting that statue, and she was not of the right proportions to be doing so. That arm is going to snap off.
Yeah, she was a little larger than the statue itself, which it was a King Kong moment on the Empire State Building.
And I was kind of embarrassed because I was so loud about it.
You're saying it was blubber that killed the beast?
It wasn't beauty that killed the beast.
Oh, man.
Blubber. But, hey, I'm fat. It's okay. We're allowed to say fat things when we're fat. And just be mindful of the statue, folks. It's a work of art. Take care of it. Don't be blobbing all over it and expect it to be there next year.
There's other statues you can climb on over there that nobody seems to. There is a great picture of our friend Bake taking a look at the steel knees of, I forget.
Lord Dunmore.
Yeah, it's of Lord Dunmore. And I posted that pic.
So there's a rich history of Point Pleasant that just goes beyond the Mothman legend, but of course it goes to the curse of Chief Cornstalk. And, you know, the legend has it he put the curse on Point Pleasant, and hence the Mothman came, and that curse lasted 200 years. And then the bridge came crumbling down in 1967, and that was the end of the Mothman sighting. So they try to correlate all these legends together. Now, to me, I find, you know, legends are great. You know, they're good stories, and, you know, maybe they have a little smidge of fiction or a fact to them. Completely separate incidents that happened, and I think it was a coincidence that they manifested themselves at the same time. I don't think Mothman was the harbinger, and it was the, soothsayer of the bridge collapse itself. I think it was a tragedy. I don't think they're related, and I was very careful to kind of not bring that up while we were in Point Pleasant, because there are still people around that were affected by the bridge collapsing, and 46 people died. You know, that's a remarkable number.
54.
54.
Right.
That's a number higher than what they even have posted, but it's sad because it's still a large amount of life in a small town. And it's like everybody lost a neighbor in that. And it's pretty sad. So I don't want to go stirring up bad feelings and get us run out of town by pitchforks and
no,
and what have you.
Of course not.
But and I think everybody was pretty respectful of that. I think the story ties it to it, but then you throw in the anomaly of Indrid Cold, which nobody talked about over the weekend that I heard.
Well, I brought it up to you on I believe it was Friday when we arrived there, before really the festivities kicked off, and I just asked you that question about Indrid Cold, which I've got so many questions regarding that to begin with, because in the initial Derenberger interview that he did, I believe it was the following day on television, he never used the name Indrid. He just referred to him as Cold. And Indrid came up later on down the road and got tied in as Indrid Cold. But initially in his interview, at no point does he ever say the first name. He just refers to it as Cold. And what he described is completely different than that of a Mothman type of entity. It wasn't even close. This was more UFO related.
Yeah.
On top of
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, on top of that, with the Silver Bridge collapse and the sighting of the Mothman, we had one more entity involved, which were the Men in Black that were visiting people after seeing UFOs. And all those tied together, I don't know if one had anything to do with the other, like you said, Sean. I'm not really sure.
I just think it's too much to be put into, one conclusive pile of, fact that they're all related. I think it's too much that makes it so incredible that it's just not possible. The Men in Black, again, what was the purpose of them being there? Were they following up on the Mothman sightings? Because that would make sense, right? But Indrid Cold, from the Darren Berger interview, this was a being from the Ganymedes galaxy, right? The Grid
right.
Man. He wasn't even of our planet. So you throw that in there, and Maz, you're really talking about some wild stuff. Like, it's now gone beyond a giant mutated bird that evolved into a Mothman-like entity with big glowing red eyes. Now you've got men from other galaxies visiting us.
That is a lot to digest, and again, I feel like to a certain extent we're always trying to fight to validate, not us specifically, but people that believe in the legitimacy of some of the things we believe in. And when you're really throwing all these multiple aspects in, it makes it even harder to sell as a package.
Yeah,
correct.
Completely agree.
Now,
Virginia itself is just very strange. It always seems like it's got something weird going on, from Flatwoods Monster and Indrid Cold, going back to Mothman. It just seems like it's just so much. And I'm still trying to relate how the Men in Black all fit into this. Maz, go ahead. Or Vance, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in the 1960s, a very common male type of wear was a white shirt, black tie, dark suit coat, dark pants, dark shoes, and a fedora. That was very common. Very common. It was business wear, but it was outdoor business wear. When you would travel, you'd have the fedora on. Sunglasses, yeah, that's when they started to get popularized. But it was a very common wear. So if you were in a business agency of any sort, whether you were a newspaper reporter, whether you were an investigator, whether you were an insurance salesman, this would be the type of style that you would have worn back then as a man. So if somebody came into Point Pleasant, which I don't see Point Pleasant as at that time as an extreme business center where everybody would be dressed that way. So if a couple of men did come into town asking questions about particular sightings, wearing the black coats, black pants, black shoes, fedora, sunglasses, it may not have been seen so much out of context then. We just kind of refer to it now as the Men in Black, and this is how they dress. I'm not sure that if there is a Men in Black scenario or actuality of Men in Black, I don't think they're probably going to be wearing that specific type of thing nowadays, because they'd stand out like a sore thumb. They might just be wearing t-shirts and jeans like the rest of us do to blend in and make their point be known and move on.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I had an opportunity to talk to one of the Frick brothers, and they're famous for their research in Point Pleasant and their overall, sustainability in that area for over the years, and their investigations, and their Men in Black impersonating, right? And
they are intimidating looking Men in Black.
They are. And it was really funny because Tim said to me he now thinks that the Men in Black are impersonating them.
Right.
So it was just, it was funny to me to think about, if you meet the Fricks, you look at them, they legitimately meet the profile of, the Men in Black, tall, lanky guys, kind of, and it's going to sound rude if I say it, not abnormal, but definitely distinct in features.
Very.
They're easy to point out in the crowd, and dressed up as the Men in Black, there would be no doubt in my mind if you saw them walking through Point Pleasant and had no idea who the hell they were, they would look like Men in Black to you. Instantaneously, you would be able to recognize them as Men in Black.
So, no, very true. Yeah, they pull it off pretty well, actually.
And, of course, there's a lot of people there, cosplaying Men in Black, but the Fricks really fit the bill. And, the Men in Black, they started showing up in 1966 after the Scarberry sightings, Linda Scarberry, the initial sighting out in the TNT area. And they were harassing other witnesses. But I just don't understand the purpose of them being there. What were they harassing them from?
Well, from how I take it from the stories in which I've read and the video presentations that I have seen, there was a number of UFO sightings there, or strange lights in the sky. And I think maybe if that were an actual case that you need to not see this and move along and don't report this, maybe that's why. I don't know that it has anything to do with this entity, like the Mothman, for example, but it could have been a military project. It's very possible that it was a military project. Look, we're talking closer to the East Coast. A lot of military installations there. And, the mountainous area in which Point Pleasant sits is kind of secluded. And so if they were testing something out, or it was doing whatever it was doing, moving through the mountains the way some of the witnesses said, it's possible that, we have to send a couple of representatives out there just to keep this hush-hush, because at that point we were in the thick of the Cold War with Russia. So you need to shut up. You didn't see this. That's very possible. I'm not sure that Men in Black are alien, but again, you brought up the fact that you see the Frick brothers walking in those suits, you'd be a little intimidated. You might want to just be quiet.
Yeah, I agree. Any thoughts, Maz?
Maybe 2 or 3. Okay. No, so, have there been any documented cases where the Men in Black were not associated with, aliens? There's supposed to be what? There's like 2 train of thoughts. One's, government official. The other is alien extraterrestrials themselves, I guess. Are you guys aware of any other kind of idea thrown around regarding the Men in Black?
Me particularly, no. But look, if you have an extraterrestrial being that would have the technology to come here from another time or space or galaxy, do you really think they have to stoop to low technology to dress up in a suit and try to intimidate somebody not to talk about it? No, they probably have other means of abducting you and making you forget everything you ever saw to begin with, which I think in the movie Men in Black, when you got that blink out light, it kind of makes a mockery of it. But you would think an alien would have a technology that would just memory wipe you and you have no idea what you just saw, instead of using intimidation dressed in human clothes. So I don't lean really too much towards the Men in Black being of an extraterrestrial domain, but more or less a government domain. That's just my personal take, though.
Man, don't smack talk the neuralizer. That's some serious technology right there.
The neuralizer, that's what it was.
Exactly, hey. That stuff sticks with you as a kid, But, no, I think it's one of our earlier episodes when we were talking about Clinton Road and how it kind of is a snowball effect where there might have been something that had credence to it at one point, but now it's kind of like you're grasping at straws. I think the whole Mothman situation might have something similar going on, where there might have been a little touch of this or a touch of that, or once you get that going, you kind of add to it and sprinkle in a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Before you know it, it becomes this kind of like convoluted story. So even if there are little hints of truth dashed throughout or peppered throughout, it's hard to see that because it's just almost perpetuated into this hard to believe concoction.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of human nature too. We've had those social experiments where you start a story with one person and they pass it on down the line, and by the time it gets to the 20th person in line, you have an entirely different story. It's part of human nature and how you get your facts mixed up and you mishear and you missee what has been given to you. And I think for sensationalism, that probably does happen a lot. if somebody saw a 2-foot tall kangaroo jumping around in their backyard and they were to tell somebody about it, a friend or a relative, oh, they had a 8-foot tall kangaroo jumping around. Next thing you know, you got something the size of a telephone pole jumping around. No, it never started out that way to begin with. But it's part of human nature that we do kind of inflate the story to make it a little bit more interesting for the listener.
I agree with that, and it happens, and I think that's exactly, what, to Maz's point, you have these areas of really intense activity that maybe there was some activity there, but perhaps it was really blown out of proportion. And sometimes people, just need to feel important, and they have to have these encounters to fit in. Lord knows why. I know that wouldn't be my particular way to gain attention, but for some people that's what they have, right?
Right. No, I agree. And it is a matter of social absence that somebody would perpetuate something like that, which is still a very common problem to deal with in research, cryptozoological research, is to weed out those that are faced with that from those that have actually seen or experienced something. And unfortunately, that's the task at hand. If you do decide to ever become a researcher in the field, you can believe or at least accept everything that you hear without judgment, but then it's up to you to do the footwork and the research and try to sort through all that and figure out, well, what is actually real without calling that person at BS. You don't want to do that to people. You might say, this is what actually happened. Isn't this what you saw? And chances are you'll probably say, yeah, that's what happened. And that's... Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, Vance. You can finish your thought.
No, that was my thought.
I was just going to say, isn't that the ultimate irony, is that there are people that want to come out with these things that aren't necessarily true just to kind of feel like they're a part of something culturally significant, and then you have people who are afraid to be ostracized, who really do think that they've had these experiences.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, exactly.
So often.
No, I agree with you. I'm sure it happens. I've had conversations with people that did not share their story with anybody else, and it was just by coincidence that the topic came up, and they very meekly explained to me something weird happened, and they wanted to see what my reaction was. I'm like, really? Well, do tell me. And they would slowly start to break into their story and explain to me what they were experiencing or what encounter they had. And I was fascinated with it, but it does take some people a little bit of coaxing to get them to crack and spill the beans as to what happened. Otherwise, if the subject never came up, they'd still be holding on to it without sharing it. And you're right, it is kind of ironic that other people are like, I saw this, and it's actually happened, and they're waving their arms and trying to get that attention. And I know, Sean, you're pretty good at being able to spot those type of people by the way they present their story and how authentic or how their tone of voice is, the look in their eyes, the way they flow the story. Has it been rehearsed? Is it not rehearsed? Are they struggling with it? And those are just little telltale signs that a lot of witnesses either give up or don't give up when they do share their story, and you can kind of sort through that a little bit easier.
Yeah, you can tell by the way somebody carries themselves at times, and I feel like the more people are willing to give details and eagerly give you the details, the more they are at fabricating it. That's just one of my tells. I'm not trying to, and I'm not saying everybody that does that is that way, but it sure doesn't, doesn't make them feel any, doesn't make me feel any better about them.
You know what that reminds me of? I like Danielle and I, we love watching a lot of true crime things, as a lot of people do. There's a fascination. I'm sure that's something else we'll dig into in the future here, but I always laugh when people call 911, like the spouse or whatever, and they're giving answers to questions that aren't being asked. They're just like trying to throw hints in there, And it's like, why would you even have to acknowledge that? You're trying to make an alibi. It's a similar kind of thing, Sean, where that you're referring to. I think people try to over answer questions and answer things that weren't even asked yet, instead of just going one by one. And it's the same kind of mentality to me, at least.
Yeah, over helpful. It's like the arsonists that always go back to the scene of the crime, to see their work. After a while, you have a serial arsonist, the chances are they always go back to kind of, relish and try to be quote-unquote helpful.
Not just arsonists. Most murderers go back to the scene for multiple reasons. Also, they want to get that high that they have to go back there. But a lot of killers have actually been caught that way. They've specifically tried to create scenarios to get people to come back, and they know that they're going to be one of those people in the crowd. So that's a good point, though.
You don't say this from experience, do you, Mass?
Absolutely not. I like to say I'm too lazy to be a killer. I'm a slob. I make a mess. I could eat a food that doesn't even, like a solid food that shouldn't break off, and somehow I'll get crumbs everywhere. If there's a mess that can be made, I will find it. It's just not worth the work, man. Just not worth I'm too lazy. I'd rather just keep the heat inside.
Well, I think with all these subjects in which we are talking about, really started to become fully developed at the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant. And I think there was a lot of people that were all questioning each other. There's that term that's been used quite often. I even heard it at the festival of mass hysteria. I don't know how much I really buy into mass hysteria as far as a cryptid goes. Mass hysteria was more based on something that was real. And especially during the Cold War, you were always on that paranoid because that was something that could actually happen. And mass hysteria could provoke that. During the 9/11 attacks, there was a lot of mass hysteria. You see a backpack that a kid left at the bus stop, and it caused that mass hysteria. Is this again going to happen? I understand that. With a cryptid, I'm not sure that mass hysteria really comes into play with one person sees it, then the next person is so scared that they think they see it, and it's possible, but I don't know that mass hysteria really plays into the cryptid world as to what happened in Point Pleasant. How many was there? 200 sightings of this thing in Point Pleasant during 66, 67? It was close to 200, I believe. To say that was mass hysteria, I don't know. I understand it's a small community and people talk with each other. But then again, if you're seeing something in a small community, you may be saying something to protect others too. Hey, I saw this. This was near your place. Be careful. It's possible too. It seems to me, looking through all the strange events that have happened that have had headlines regarding UFOs, cryptid sightings, all happened in 1967.
I guess my bigger issue with, is again, them trying to make make it all connected. I just don't see enough evidence to make it all connected.
Between the Silver Bridge collapse, the Men in Black, and the Mothman?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, hey, you had some people, I don't know who these people are, that said they saw the Mothman on the Silver Bridge just before it collapsed. We had some witnesses that said they saw the Men in Black underneath the Silver Bridge before it collapsed. Okay, I guess, but did that actually happen? I don't know.
Are those the same people that have to add more to every story?
Mm-hmm. Or just to try to answer what happened. Well, let's just blame this entity, and we can put that story away. I'm not sure. And I also find it kind of interesting too, if you think of the human psyche after the bridge collapse. That's a huge tragedy. That was a horrifying tragedy for that town to face. I'm not sure if anybody did see the Mothman after that was willing to come forward to try to take away from the tragedy, to put themselves on top of the pile to say, I saw the Mothman again. So maybe that's why these sightings just kind of ceased immediately after that bridge collapse, because who would have the audacity to overstep a tragedy like that to put themselves in the forefront again by bringing up the Mothman. You know, maybe there were more sightings after the bridge collapsed, but everybody that may have seen it may have just kept it to themselves, just out of fear of ridicule, that really we're dealing with this and you're going to bring this Mothman creature back up again.
The fact that there was no more sightings of Mothman after 67 at Point Pleasant, none.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He retired.
And why did it retire, though? You know what I mean?
Well, because back then Social Security was really good. It's not like it is today. Why you gotta fly around and terrorize people when you got it all? You got it made, man.
There is documented, but not proven. Of course, none of this is proven. But other disasters that have happened that both have had a Mothman sighting and disasters that have happened that have not had a Mothman sighting. To say that it's the harbinger of doom, okay, maybe it's just there to give a warning. Maybe it's not there at all. Who's to say? But Fukushima power plant in Japan, there were witnesses that said they saw a flying humanoid. They don't refer to it as a Mothman, but in Japanese lore that goes back thousands of years, they do have artistry work in scripture that shows this winged humanoid owl type of being. And is that just a coincidence? Maybe this is all part of our psyche as far as monsters go, and that we all have to have a monster in our stories, in our lineage, as a culture develops. Maybe that's possible, but there were people that said they saw this flying humanoid thing just prior to the Fukushima disaster. And I believe there were a couple other disasters where it had been seen also. The Krakatoa volcano explosion, there were reports that there were some witnesses that saw a flying humanoid, but did it actually give warning to people or have any interaction with people the way it did in Point Pleasant, where they're being chased? Why is this thing chasing people? I have no idea, but it seemed like it was a little bit more aggressive behavior in Point Pleasant than these other disasters that have happened, which goes back to the whole thing, Sean, like you said. I don't know that one has anything to do with the other. It could have been exactly what whatever agency it was at the time that investigated the bridge collapse, saying it was a failure of this pin, and the plate cracked and the pin dropped out, and it's like a chain. The bridge was only as strong as its weakest link, and when that weak link broke, the whole bridge comes down. Needless to say, they have never built another bridge again the same way. Suspension bridges have totally changed on how they are made, so that type of disaster wouldn't happen again. And what's Mothman sitting there going, oh great, now I'm going to have to figure out a different way? I don't know. I'm not sure that that's the case.
Well, I'm sorry to correct you, Vance, but I think you were referring to Mothra.
Well, there again, Maz, Mothra really got left out of this whole thing. Mothra is how much bigger than the Mothman, and yet he gets just like no notoriety at all.
Yeah, and he's got that awesome song too. Is Mothra a she, right? I think I'm not in.
Mothra is a she.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's the Moth Woman. That's why, because we're a sexist society, unfortunately.
Either way, the Mothman is a cryptid as just a icon. It is one of my favorites. I bought a necklace, a Mothman necklace, and it's made out of brass, and I got it from a vendor, and I'm like, yeah, I wear this because I just identify with the whole coolness of the thing and the all-encompassing cryptid. And there's, Bigfoot researchers, and they wear their Sasquatch necklaces or jewelry or shirts, whatever. But I just have an identity with the Mothman, and I think a lot of other people have the same type of gravitational pull towards the Mothman for the same reason. It's cool, period. There's no more, no less about it. If there's a cryptid that I would like to be real, yeah, I'll sign me up for a Mothman. As long as it's not a demon, I'll be all right with that.
The demon
screamer. I think you guys bring up interesting points, though, when you're referring to the Mothman. When you have something like UFOs or ghosts, or even Bigfoot. There's so many documented sightings throughout time where there's not really a lull. But then you get something like Mothman or like a flatwoods creature or things like that seem almost like a special event, so to speak. Now appearing one time only, where there's these short little windows. And to me, those are kind of the ones that are less believable, or at least as a society, it seems like people believe in them less. I just find that interesting.
Yeah, it's like a one-hit wonder.
Exactly.
And if people don't really take a liking to it a whole lot, it's like a classic song. Yeah, okay, it was a one-hit wonder back in the 1950s, and then Quentin Tarantino comes along 40 years later and uses that same song in one of his movies. Now that song is popular all over again. And maybe that's the same thing that's happening with Mothman. It kind of fell off. Look, Mothman, yeah, though it happened in the 60s, let me tell you, during the 1970s and 1980s, nobody would have known what the Mothman is. No one. There was no cultural circles around Mothman. Granted to the fact that the internet certainly has helped propel that name to the forefront again for people to have a community built around the Mothman. But the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant started back in, 2002, Sean? Was its first year.
Yes.
So that's a big time gap between 1967 and 2002 to start a festival around this creature. So, again, that just kind of makes my point. It's a one-hit wonder, just like the Flatwood Monster. It's a one-hit wonder thing, and if it sticks, great. People will inflate it, make it bigger. If not, kind of fades away, and that's the end of it. And why would a cryptid or creature or visitor only show up once and then not come back again? I don't know. Maybe they just look at this planet going, nope, don't want no part of that. I'm out of here.
I mean, how many times do you have to go to Virginia? Isn't once enough?
Actually, Virginia is a beautiful state. If you've never been there, it's I love Virginia. It's just very scenic and it's comfortable. Seems like most of the women there are all blondes. I don't know how that happened, but that got
the truth comes out.
That got pointed out to me by Jeff Thomas, I think, when we were sitting at dinner. He's like, have anybody noticed that just about every female here is blonde? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe the old down south thing of, never mind. We already brought that
up. Sean,
I don't want to get in trouble with those people.
For us. What say you, Sean?
Oh, I don't say a lot. I just think this is a great mystery. There was never a resolution to it. As soon as the sightings began, I feel like they came to a culmination when the bridge collapsed and it never happened again. Yet worldwide, and still to this day, similar creatures, if you go by the pop cultural description of Mothman, are still being seen. So really, are these Mothman type beings the same originally seen in Point Pleasant? My answer is no. Very separate, distinct entities that happen to spin from a very large, possibly mutated bird to what people are experiencing today. To say nothing of the metaphysical stuff that you've seen from the movie The Mothman Prophecies and all that other jazz. I think it all makes for a great story. I think when you start tearing it down and start looking at it bit by bit, it becomes a little bit more clear about what happened, but not definitive. So that's where I'm at with all this.
Right. I mean, is there any correlation between the Van Meter monster and the Cornwall Owl Man? Is it all the same thing, but yet they look different? Who knows? I know we keep saying who knows, and yes, it is still a mystery, but that's all we can do here is talk about it and spark the listener's interest into asking the listener too. Yeah. Throw us your opinions, suggestions, and what your ideas are, or what information you have learned that might be an interesting take on all of this.
But Mothman, of course, kind of reminds me of like Batman. If you could make up a cryptid that was something man, what kind of cryptid would you want to see? It has to have man as the second part.
Well,
pick another animal and...
let me put parentheses there, because when you brought up Batman, that's where the name Mothman was coined from.
Yes.
From a newspaper reporter that just associated a villain in the comic book, a Batman comic book series, which was called the Mothman. and he had just used that as a name for this creature that was seen in Point Pleasant. So even though you bring up Batman, yes, that's where the term Mothman actually originated from, was the Batman comic book series. But what cryptid would I like to see or put together myself? The way the Mothman is designed today as an icon, not the original owl-looking thing that was sketched back in Point Pleasant, but more of the humanoid with arms and bat-like wings with an insect type of face. That's cool. I mean, that's just a cool-looking cryptid creature monster, whether it's science fiction or real. But that's what I kind of gravitate towards. So, yeah, I would be drawing that up and make a tulpa out of it. There it is.
Yeah,
that's
but
my
Vance,
creature.
don't dance around the issue. I asked you a question. I got to get an answer, man. The listeners want to know. What man are you going to create here?
If I could create any creature and turn it into a man, I would probably, I just thought about this. Probably Piranha Man.
Oh, Piranha Man is awesome.
Some sort
All
of
right.
piranha, like an aqua cryptid.
Okay, well then, fine. We'll go with Skunk Man. How about
Skunk
that?
Man? Oh.
Sure.
I've been in the
Square
elevator with
lands for a
Skunk
good
Man.
time.
Yeah, you my glands.
All right, Maz. What's your cryptid? If
I was
it could be
honestly
turned into a man.
I was honestly scrambling to think of something while we were all talking, and I couldn't because, despite the fact that I decided to ask you guys this, I didn't think about it at all myself because I'm that well prepared always.
Yeah,
I didn't even know what we were talking about until halfway through the show today. Okay. I have a reputation to upkeep, Vance. People expect nothing from me.
Well, then just, I don't know, maybe take, I don't know, go up with a slug man or snail.
Oh, no, I have an answer, but I just mean
Okay, then what's your answer? All right.
I would like to see Squid Man.
Well, just watch SpongeBob. It's right there, man.
It's close enough, but
still, it is close enough. The reality of Mothman.
Wow. 20%.
Out of 20% reality.
Yeah,
okay.
20% reality. I think they saw something. I think it got blown out of proportion. And but it's a great story, and I love the festival and the people.
Well, I just want to confirm before we're giving these numbers, even though we already kind of did, this is just on Mothman, him or herself, correct? Just the creature, not necessarily saying that everything is true.
Right, just the Mothman as an entity. Reality at 100% or at 1%.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I thought this was like a hypothetical thing, like we were getting spiritual.
Oh, what's your percentage at Mothman?
It's got to be less than 20. I mean, again, this is the beauty of our podcast is that we are believers. We obviously love this stuff. That's why we're talking about it. It's not like we have a podcast where we touch on a little bit of everything. Like, there's what's that thing I listen to sometimes? Like, stuff you should know. I've listened to it a few times, and they've done a few episodes about this kind of thing, and I can't listen to it because it's obvious that they have such a negative attitude towards towards any of this stuff that it's like, why do I want to try to learn about the history of something that you don't even believe is real? So from this standpoint, we're very open. We're the opposite, but at the same rate, in the same token, we're very pragmatic and reasonable in our beliefs. We're not the type of people that believe everything down the line is real. We take it one case-by-case basis. So with that being said, I'd say probably I'll go with my I'm battling with myself here. I'm going to say 12%.
Okay. Well, that's fair. I'm going to go right around 1/4, do about 25%. I'll leave 3/4 open for discussion and plausibility that, it didn't. But 25%, I think that there's so much scientific physics that have not been answered yet, that we're yet to discover, that it lends credence to the possibility that this type of a creature, not necessarily described in the cultural icons in which we look at Mothman today, but more of the icon of the initial sketch drawing of what the witnesses saw. And I would lend credence to about 25% reality to it. So if you haven't been to Mothman Festival, I highly recommend everybody, pack your bags. Generally, it's the third weekend in September, Sean. I have not seen
third weekend in
the
September.
post. I have not seen the post go up yet to confirm those dates. But as soon as you find those dates, you got to book your hotel rooms.
Absolutely.
Because they will be booked a year in advance. So there is availability for camping or just drive in the same day. I drove in from Chicago, so I could be there on the same day. So even if you live 300-400 miles away, just drive on in. It's well worth it to attend the Point Pleasant Mothman Festival in September of 2020. Anything else to add?
Yeah, before we go, I want to send a shout out to Shannon LeGros over at Into the Fray for hosting us this week. We love Shannon. She puts on a great program over there, and we're glad to be associated with such fine other podcasters, as well as our new friends, the Moth Boys. I've been listening to the Moth Boy podcast for some time, and these guys they're a comedy podcast, but they do like cryptozoology, and they're funny. And God, did we have them rolling when we spent a few minutes with them over the weekend.
It was
we weren't able to
entertaining.
spend a lot of time with them, but we were able to spend some, a nice little moment, and we just all gelled well, and we wish them good luck and continued success on their podcast, the Moth Boys podcast. Check it out on wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get our podcasts, and follow us, rate us, review us. We need your feedback, folks. We do the show for you, the listeners, and we're always looking for great reviews. So thanks for listening. Go ahead, Vance, and take us home.
All right, folks, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
Thank you for coming along to this week's event. Remember, if by chance you get an odd feeling and something doesn't seem right, don't be alarmed by it. It's just the supernormal.